Okay, so this was the game I wanted to review this week, Lode Runner: The Legend Returns. Now, most games will tell you what the operating system requirements are, and if they're missing on a 90s CD, usually means the game works in both DOS and Windows. And when I did my research, I did indeed note that this game was released for both DOS and Windows. But this CD only has the Windows version on it. Again, there isn't a single thing on the packaging or on the CD itself to indicate either DOS or Windows compatibility. It's only found out when I tried to install this thing. Suffice to say, we won't be covering it today. At least not until I can source a DOS copy. But you know what? That's fine. I have a way more obscure puzzle platformer lined up. Say hello to today's ancient DOS game, Roboman. Now, flashing. Ugh. Geez, that's actually really freaking hard to look at. I'm guessing the guy who made this game probably never noticed because he was working with a CRT display with a poor response time, so all the colors blended together more readily. In any case, this is a game where you play a robot, or a robotic man as it were, whose prime directive is not to protect the innocent or uphold the law, but to pop balloons. Yeah, I'm really not quite sure what the thought process on creating this game was, but as far as the basic gameplay is concerned, it's average. Those of you who've been watching ADG for a while probably recall how I've mentioned before that games which feature balloons or bubbles or other such things don't really stand out well if you can replace those balloons or bubbles with other things and still have a viable game which makes sense. Well, this is one such game where the balloons could literally be replaced with just about any other objects and the game still works. This doesn't make the game bad, but it does make it more generic when it comes down to it. That said though, I'm going to bet that a number of you who try this game following this video will find yourselves wanting to play it for a little longer than you'd expect to given the frustrations it presents. Well, I intend to explain exactly why that is later in the video, and for those of you who understand the reference I made before I even started talking, you may be able to hazard a guess as to why that is. Roboman was developed and published in 1989 by a man known as Brian Goble, going under the moniker of XOR Corporation at the time. Now, if that author's name sounds familiar, well, it's the same guy who later made the Microman series of games for Windows 3.1, helped to co-found Monolith Productions, and now runs a game development company known as Hipsoft, which has numerous game releases under its belt, even a Microman remake called Microman's Crazy Computers. As for this game, it's a one-player puzzle platformer supporting CGA 4-color, Tandy 16-color, and EGA 16-color graphics, all running at 320 by 200 resolution, but only supports the PC speaker for sound effects and music. As for its current release date, I believe the game's always been freeware, though finding downloads can be tricky as it's not very well known. The place I got my copy from was the DOS Games website at www.dosgames.com. Not even an old personal webpage put up by Brian ages ago has a download link for this thing. So the gameplay in Roboman is really simple when it comes down to it. You move left and right, you can jump straight up or at an angle, and you have a crouch jump similar to Super Mario Bros. 2, whereby if you crouch and then jump, you'll jump straight up, but a bit higher than usual. Although the controls are basic, they're kinda tricky because you can't control your midair velocity, meaning once you commit to a jump in a particular direction, you have to see it through. Plus, if you walk off an edge, you'll fall straight down, no choice about it. The goal in each level, as already stated, is to pop the balloons, but you don't have to pop all of them. Hidden in a specific balloon in each level is a key which you need to grab to open the exit to the next level. Now, the position of this key is not random, so once you know where it is, you can go for it easily enough. However, popping the balloons is worth points, popping all of the balloons is worth an additional end-of-level bonus, and every 5,000 points nets you an extra life. So if you feel you can get all the balloons without too much trouble, it's often a good idea to do so. But if you start running into difficulties, but you know where the key is, you can just opt to get the level over with as fast as possible. Actually, not all the balloons are worth points. Occasionally you'll make one explode, and inside will be a piece of dynamite or a bomb, which will then explode again. And if you're caught in that blast, you die. I guess this answers the ultimate question of if you can indeed explode twice, because in the case of the balloons in this game, the answer is yes. Much to the chagrin of a certain purple pony. Speaking of dying, Roboman is apparently just as fragile as the balloons he's going after, because if he falls from too great a height, he head plants into the ground and loses a life. Although I must say, the fall damage is handled surprisingly well. Typically when a game hasn't been coded perfectly, fall damage is based on distance. Thus, if you fall Y number of pixels, you'll take fall damage. But here in this game, it's actually more properly based on velocity. Sort of. There's a maximum falling velocity Roboman can reach, and once he reaches this velocity, a short distance more will trigger the fall to end in death. This means walking off an edge or jumping down gives you the proper amount of height to fall to reach platforms below you. But if you use a springboard and end up falling below the Y level of said springboard, you get very little extra distance down before the fall becomes deadly because you've already reached this critical velocity. Some levels also have a special bonus balloon which shows up moments after you grab the key for your first time during a run. Well, this bonus balloon only stays on screen for a moment, but if you can pop it, you'll either find an extra life inside or a special star which takes you to a bonus level if you can then finish the level following. One thing I think is really neat too is that the bonus balloons are actually bigger than the normal balloons you go for, not just different in color, so it kind of really helps to drive the point across that they're special in some way. As for the levels themselves, this is where things start to get difficult. The levels in this game start off fairly tame, but rapidly become super freaking hard. And I know it looks like it should be a cakewalk, especially given the lack of enemies, but no. These levels are deceptively difficult due to a combination of the touchy jump mechanics and some surprisingly evil things, as well as the limited lives. You only start with 4 lives, and if you run out, the game is over and you have to go back to the start. Or use a password to continue, but you only get passwords once every few levels or so, thus you'll end up replaying levels quite frequently trying to get through all of this. Now, an example of how evil the level designs are include invisible platforms which become visible when you step on them, and visible platforms which crumble away when you step on them. These end up altering the progression through the level, as they're often put in places where not having a platform or having a platform suddenly changes the whole dynamics of what you're trying to do. Not to mention, the game clearly knows it's being evil, because it has these skulls placed throughout some of the levels, and if you happen to touch one of them, you guessed it. Absolutely nothing happens. I swear, this must be the only 90s game in existence with skulls which don't equal death. However, despite how evil the level design can get, the game actually preys on your impatience. I guarantee you that if you attempt to rush through levels you've done before in this game, you're gonna die. Basically, rushing gets you killed here. If you want to guarantee your survival, you have to suppress the urge to just breeze through everything. And this again ties into how a single tiny mistake can cost you a life. It can actually get pretty frustrating after a while, even when you have 99 lives. Oh yeah, I accidentally discovered a cheat in this game, which allows you to max out your lives counter. It's actually not too hard to find on your own accord, but basically, the game has a key combination to end a game in progress, Control E, and normally when you hit this combo, the game immediately ends and goes back to the title screen. However, if you press Control E during the last second of a death animation just before the screen wipes, your lives counter will suddenly say 9. But you don't have 9 lives, you have 99. The next time you die, it'll go down to 98. Even with all the lives though, the game did ultimately win out with the frustration on the later levels, though I don't think there were very many more to go, judging by a quick look through the raw level data file. Overall, Roboman is a frustrating and average game. It's not terrible by any means, but it doesn't do anything special to really stand out. Yet, despite any of that, this is a game that can draw you to want to play it entirely because of the balloon popping mechanic. Balloons are kind of a funny thing in reality, because they're large, colorful, they float extremely well, contrary to what gravity would have us believe, and despite being such simple things, they also disappear rapidly and with an extreme amount of noise when faced with just the slightest amount of damage. Due to all of these factors, they're extremely good at drawing attention. I've heard it said that if you give a bunch of balloons to a bunch of full-grown adults, they'll degenerate back to behaving like children with them, and I've witnessed this phenomenon myself on more than one occasion, and would be lying if I said I hadn't also fallen victim to it. But this brings us full circle to the quote I put at the start of the episode, which actually comes from a Let's Play of Resident Evil 7, put out by Pro Jared a year ago. I'll link to the specific part of that Let's Play in the video description, but there's a part halfway in where he joked that someone could make a balloon-popping simulator game and make $1 million on Steam with it. And you know what? He's right. It's such a simple concept and delves straight into that part of the psyche that responds to balloons so readily that If such a game is done well, with believable physics, a solid variety of game mechanics and challenges, and decent graphics and sound, you could bet it would sell numerous copies. And there's a few games out there which come close, but completely miss the realism mark, and thus doesn't capture attention the same way real balloons do. So for the moment, it's kinda weird that the closest thing which exists is a single room buried halfway into a gruesome survival horror game. Although the gameplay itself runs fine with the auto cycle setting, you actually want to set a fixed cycles count so that the non-gameplay aspects of this thing run properly. I was using a cycle setting of 1000, but you can adjust that as desired. Anywho, that's all for today's episode of Ancient DOS Games. Episode 231 is going to be on Saturday, March 3rd, and we're going to be taking a look at an RPG which kind of defies typical conventions by having exploration occur in both 2D and 3D environments. If you think you know which game that might be, then be sure to send your guess to adg@pixelships.com, and stay tuned because I'm pretty sure this one runs in DOS. Thanks for watching, everyone, and special thanks to those of you supporting me on Patreon. Here's just a small sample of you guys.